Do you remember Counterfeit Cat, that weird Disney XD show that nobody else talks about? Well, if not, you're in for a treat. Counterfeit Cat was a Disney XD show developed by Aardman Studios. If that name sounds familiar, think Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, and Flushed Away. It ran from May 12, 2016 to January 22, 2017, which is less than a year, making it Disney XD's shortest running series. The show follows Max, a lazy and selfish yellow house cat, and Gark, a blue alien disguised as a cat. After crash landing on Earth, he finds himself in the home of Betty, Max's owner, and from there the two find themselves in all sorts of crazy situations due to Gark's unique abilities and Max using them to his advantage. This show was one of those, "oh dude, you just unlocked a core memory" type of shows for me. I remember watching the show a lot as a kid, but I could never really speak to my friends about it. They were too busy watching fucking Teen Titans Go or some shit. So, let's strap in and see if my childhood memories have been a lie.
What's the internet?
Well, they say it can be a blessing or a curse, a magical place where every dream and every nightmare can come true. But mostly it's a place where people buy and sell stuff and watch videos.
Nah, that sounds about right. Counterfeit Cat is a very character-driven show. Most of the plots are driven by the conflict that is shared or between Max and Gark. I like to think of these two as Disney's versions of Gumball and Darwin. Like, I hate to bring in a comparison like that so early, but I can't think of any other duo they remind me of. They fight over the dumbest things. One of them is naive and gullible with a cuteness factor, and the other is short-sighted and selfish. They can get into their disagreements, but at the end of the day, they always find a way to put their differences aside. Their friendship never felt fake or manufactured, although the later episodes do lose a bit of that touch, if we're not counting the finale. The first episode, Go Viral, is a perfect example of the dynamic in the beginning. Max and Gark want to make viral cat videos to get more attention from their owner. Max keeps asking Gark to use his powers for things he could honestly do himself, or just for very selfish reasons. Over time, Gark gets this lump on his head, which eventually manifests into this giant alien that decides to kill Gark. Max realizes how much of a jerk he was being and apologizes, offering to sacrifice himself so Gark doesn't get hurt. The first few times they do this, it's honestly a really touching thing to see, but can get boring after a bit. I definitely enjoy the episodes a lot more when it's just the two of them with a common goal, instead of them fighting and coming back together. True, they may be complete opposites in how they think, but that doesn't mean they should always be at each other's throats. Max is a selfish, lazy, and short-sighted character who often doesn't appreciate the things Gark or others do for him. The best way to describe him is the feline version of Daffy Duck, and I'm talking Daffy Duck from the Looney Tunes show, the one who sold his friend's cold credit for a yacht.
I just told Porky that so he'd give me the money for the yacht.
There are quite a few times where he's mean to Gark and a huge hypocrite, like in Firstborn, where after they create a sentient furball which they have to take care of, Max, who has never shown at any point to be willing to take care of it, decides that he should do it all of a sudden because he's the better parent than Gark. He acts extremely possessive and pushes Gark to the curb just to take care of something he originally never wanted responsibility for, which was created out of spite because Gark can make better furballs than him. But hear me out, that doesn't mean that he's an unlikable character. Yes, he's rude and hypocritical, but you gotta remember that he's a cat at the end of the day. And if you know anything about these little fuckers, is that they can be all those things and more. No offense to any cat owners, but you gotta admit cats can be bitches sometimes. So when I see Max doing all of these things, I see it from the perspective of an animal just trying to do what they do. And aside from that, they actually give Max a couple of interesting characteristics that give him more than what's on the surface. Like in the episode Catnipped, where it's revealed that he used to be addicted to catnip, but like really addicted. The minute he gets a sniff of the stuff, he goes completely insane. And the design of coked up Max is genuinely fucking creepy. This episode does an excellent job at making you scared of this version of him. He talks in barely understandable English, is constantly foaming at the mouth, and not even remembering Gark, his best and only friend, until he sees him in trouble, further strengthening the bond these two share. Despite the fact that it may seem that he does not give a fuck about how many characters in the show hate him, it does have an effect on his subconscious. Scarlet Gark, which is one of my personal favorite episodes, reveals that he felt so bad about his actions towards others that in his sleep, he attempted to murder himself in an act of guilt. It's a shame that it never comes up again in the series, because this could have been something really interesting, but instead they play it for a joke at the end of the episode. This actually comes perfectly into play with the fact that he tries so many times to get into this group of popular animals around the block, but can never fit in. Being in with the cool kids around the block is really important to him. However, his lack of remorse for his bad habits is ultimately why he can never be him, and that's why he's lucky he has a friend like Gark.
A shortcut for what? Ah, the map!
Let's find out!
What?
Gark is Max's best and only friend in the show, and the kindest character by far. He crash-landed on Earth and ended up landing in Max's apartment, and since then the two have become best friends. To start with Gark, I really do like his character design. They really tried to make him look as cute as possible, and they did achieve that. His purple-blue color scheme and his round figure with those big eyes just staring at you, he could give Darwin a run for his money. His tentacles allow him to do many things and are often lifesavers in many situations. But more than that, they just give the animators so many unique animations they can do with them to convey different emotions or to just do different tasks. So yeah, his design is pretty cool, but what about him as a character? Well, I do have a few issues with him that I have to point out. The main problem is that he's too nice, or gullible if you will. Whenever Max asks him to do something, it always starts off small and manageable, but very quickly it can become too much for him. But every time that happens, he never stands up for himself in the slightest. He's weak, and not in an endearing way where even though he tries to stand up for himself, he just can't do it. I mean weak in the sense that he doesn't even try. There's no progression where he becomes less scared of Max and starts to say no to him. That just never happened. It's not even justified by the fact that he never wants to disappoint him, because even if he did, he knows that Max would never leave him. He has said so many times that he is his only friend, and that even without the powers, he would still be his friend. His naive nature and general gullibleness also get him into shit on a lot of the show as well, often being his Achilles heel that gets him into tough situations. However, I don't think he's necessarily a bad character, more so just annoying due to how many times we could have got to see him grow up a little bit. Looking past everything I just said though, he's genuinely a kind-hearted, good-natured, and humble character, which is the perfect counterbalance to Max, who would literally do anything in his power to get what he wants. All the flaws that Gark has in being too nice are used to directly balance Max's complete lack of empathy in the beginning. It's this very thing that makes the duo fun to watch most of the time, because the one thing this show does right with these two characters is that they don't always make this conflict in thinking the main focus of the show. More often than not, the two just go on your classic dynamic duo type of adventure, which is where the show truly shines in my opinion. Parts of the character, like Max being short-sighted and Gark being the logical one, or his general ignorance of how the Earth works, are still important aspects in the dynamic, and are thankfully toned down loads most of the time. They do actually feel like the best of friends, and the writers do a lot of showing rather than telling. There are lots of times where Gark pushes his limits for Max, and where Max sacrifices his selfish needs for Gark's safety. Thus, you never get the sense that either of them isn't the homie, because they are. It's just a very interesting homie relationship. It's very hard for me to explain it in words. Just watch the show, you'll see exactly what I mean.
Beat it, Squirt. I'm trying to catch some Z's.
What's a summoning?
It's where you have to give whoever's next to you all your snacks.
Oh.
Speaking of characters though, we have to mention the side characters. They add more layers to the show and more dynamics for Max and Gark. To start light and go more in depth, two of my favorite side characters have to be the Kid and Throckmorton. I don't know what it is, but the Kid is just so funny to me. He's the funny side character out of the bunch, but shares some traits with Max. He's not afraid to get what he wants and often uses trickery to do it. He's also probably the smartest character in the show, which makes him even more of a menace to everyone. He's not like Max in the sense that he's a bad person, but he's definitely that kind of friend who'd snitch. He is also the biggest capper in the world. This man has told so many lies in the show, and it's no wonder every single time he's in a scene he gets what he wants. Throckmorton is my other favorite character in the show, albeit he does come with a few problems of his own. To start with the positives, he has some really funny one-liners, and his voice is that typical black dude from the 70s type thing. Think Dracula from Billy and Mandy, he's basically that. However, he can also be really annoying sometimes. You see, for a character like this, it would be best to make them arrogant, yet their smarts would be their redeeming quality. However, he isn't exactly as smart or as great as he always feels the need to say he is. True, he knows alien stuff that someone like Max wouldn't know, but other than that, he's not anything special, and yet he acts like it all the damn time.
Shut the fuck up, nigga! For once!
The other side characters on the show don't have that much going for them that I can really say about them, and end up just forming one big group of side characters, which is fine because the show isn't about them, it's about these two. Their main function is to serve as Max's ops for most of the time, because they really don't like him on account of the...
Could be the lying, cheating, and stealing.
There are a few interesting moments here and there with them, however. One of the better examples being the episode Fleabag, where it's revealed that Max has a crush on Ransford, the leader of the group who is also Max's #1 hater, which is... like, okay, I guess. It's supposed to be one of those things where you pretend to hate the person you actually like type of thing, but they never really bring it up ever again, so like, what was even the point? There's also the episode The Vet, which is actually one of my favorites, because it's all about Max having to work with them. It's all about Max having to work with these guys in order to save Gark from having, well... having his butt taken at the vet. It was super fun to watch his ops being forced to work with him, because they actually have some good chemistry in this. If Max wasn't such a dickhead, we could have got more episodes like these, which I definitely would have appreciated.
What are you doing, you loony? Loony? If you recall, I'm you, so...
The show has an extremely unique sense of style, not just in the art, but the colors, the music, and the voice acting too. The art style is very different from most Disney shows I've watched. This ain't no CalArts shit. Most characters have very rounded features with thick outlines, making their silhouettes really stand out to each individual character, and in general just making the show a treat in terms of character design. If I lined up any character from this show against any other Disney show of the past decade, it would be really easy to tell which one belonged to Counterfeit Cat. The color palette is really nice and relaxing. Most of the background colors are hazy blues with greens and purples, and often have these weird abstract shapes whenever they're in space or another dimension, giving it a look unlike any other show I've seen. The soundtrack contains a wide variety of vaporwave and what I can only describe as electro trap music. The show feels very 80s in its music choice sometimes, and it wouldn't surprise me if the producers were growing up in that era. The end credits song is unironically one of my favorites in cartoons. There's such a powerfully nostalgic feeling it gives me, which I think is connected to the memories of watching the show as a kid. The voice acting can be a bit all over the place in terms of quality, with some characters like Max being perfectly executed, really giving his character that extra jerkiness to his voice that sells his character. Then there are characters like Betty and Antoine, whose voices honestly feel like they're grating on my eardrums the more I watch the show. All in all, I just really love looking at and experiencing the vibe the show has, even though I was shit at describing it. If you're enjoying the content on the channel, consider buying me a coffee or subscribing to my Patreon. You'll get perks like getting my videos early, and all in all, it just helps with making content faster. That's all, goodbye. My favorite episodes are often ones where we get Max and Gark go on a fun adventure without a forced moral at the end, or the ones where we get a broader look at the world the characters are in, or just a deeper look into a character in general, like Max versus Machine. In this episode, Betty gets a new automatic cat feeder, to which Gark decides to give it life because... Gark, I guess. After it refuses to feed Max after his brilliant manipulation, he chews its cord so that it can feed him. The machine doesn't take this too well and gives every single machine sentience to start an uprising against these two. Already the setup and concept is better than a lot of the episodes in the show. It's not the craziest or most creative, but what they managed to do with this is where it shines. They squeeze as many jokes, interactions, and plot points in the episode as they can. They have to disguise themselves as robots, leading to a lot of jokes, especially when Max meets this vacuum cleaner called Giselle, which he's supposed to hate because he's a cat and cats hate vacuum machines. Gark, being the silly that he is, decides that instead of escaping, he should become the next leader of the machines after the cat feeder dies, and steals Max's bitch.
I made something of myself!
Now that drill is a real hero. I am leaving you. I am coming, mon amour.
The whole situation is just ridiculous. It's just two bros getting distracted by politics and the bitches and just getting into a silly little situation, which is one of the scenarios the show is naturally good at depicting. Hang in There Cat is centered around internet cat culture, where after Betty loses a rap battle,
That's the last rap battle for Betty Funk Knuckles. Orange does not rhyme with porridge.
she hangs
Kind
a
of pisses
poster
me
of the
off
Hang
because
in
I
There
can think
Cat.
of a lot of things that rhyme with orange.
This is one of those moments where the show actually gives us a lore dump, and I do appreciate every chance we get to learn about their world. It's not boring either, because I think Max's voice and inflections just make him a natural-born storyteller. Max and Gark go to visit the cat as a rite of passage, but come to an unfortunate conclusion.
Wakey, wakey.
They think that the world's about to end because they killed the Hang in There Cat, and decide that one of them should take its place or just accept fate. Naturally, they exhaust the first option before Max finally commits himself to replacing him, until they reach yet another strange conclusion.
I think there's something wrong with this tree.
Another funny episode with an easy-to-digest premise. The Scarlet Mark was always bound to be one of my favorites, simply because it's a detective episode. I don't know what it is, I just love detective episodes. Like, what the fuck do you know about Squid Nar? What you know about Where's Wanda, bro? Detective episodes are just always fire, and this one isn't an exception. One, because they break the trope of everything going black and white like most of these episodes, which already sets itself apart. Two, because while they could have gone for the complete tone shift into a much more serious episode, they chose not to, which was definitely the better option. There's no way that this show works in any serious situations. After an attempt on Max's life, Gark and him decide to go to the bottom of who would want him dead. And this may surprise you, but there's quite a few options. Honestly, the funniest part of the episode is just how many ways Max almost got killed, and his reactions just sell it every time.
You don't call that danger?
It's only danger if you get hurt.
Eventually, after a long and grueling investigation, Max comes to the realization that since all the traps were pre-planned, the culprit would have to have known exactly where he would be at all times, and the only person who would know that is...
Max? The cheese Max was eating awakened his feelings about himself. Feelings he wanted to punish. His subconscious knew the scarlet mark would terrify him, so that's why he put it on every weapon.
I mentioned this when I spoke about Max's character before, but I genuinely think they could have ended up doing something with this leader in the show for some continuity, so that was a missed opportunity in my opinion. Still though, a very funny episode that took a classic trope and put its own unique spin on it. Staring Dog is my favorite episode so far in this segment. The episode starts off with this character, Staring Dog, appearing in Max's home. Up to this point so far, Max has always hated this dude for constantly staring at him, almost like a running gag. Garg tries to convince him that it's all in his head, and he just thinks that he's always staring at him. After this, Max is too afraid to stay in the same house as him, and decides to sleep in the park where Nelson and the kid are. They begin talking about the conspiracy theories as to what they think the Staring Dog is.
Yo, dingus! You can't have seen that happen to Wilma. Because if you had, you wouldn't have lived to tell the tale. That underneath that fur is a human hand! And if it points at you, your life ends instantly.
Meanwhile, Garg tries to figure out why the dog is so obsessed with Max and not him. It's a strange motivation for Garg, but I'ma let it slide, I guess. Eventually, he comes to the realization that the dog stares at Max because he looks a lot like his mother, which is a surprisingly charming and heartwarming thing for a character that has no lines.
You look just like his mom! The only reason he stares at you and not at me is that I guess he misses his mom!
Virtual Insanity is, in my opinion, the best episode in the whole show. The plot revolves around Max and Garg traveling through this virtual reality video game, bouncing between alternate realities and different versions of themselves. There are so many unique character designs in this one episode alone, each one either a reference to classic video game culture or just a creative redesign of the characters. Betty forces the two parties of Max and Garg to participate in this capture the flag style contest, which is the highlight of the episode. Seeing Max basically have to work with himself is funny as hell, and just the amount of jokes and interactions they got from essentially making 10 of the same character is a testament to the talent in the writer's room.
Ouch! Bit pointy around the edges, but delicious. Ouch!
This would probably be the first episode I'd show someone who's never watched the show. Actually, wait, that's dumb as shit. My least favorite episode by far, though, has to be the big one. In this episode, Garg tries to tell Throckmorton and Max that a massive event that could destroy the world is gonna take place, but they just don't care. Because Max gets jealous that Garg goes to T-Mort for help, even though it's completely logical since he's an alien as well. But no, Max just doesn't give a shit. He calls him a traitor, shows little regard for his feelings, super rude to him in his moments of need, and none of it is funny. The big problem is that Throckmorton is also being a selfish douche, because he constantly wants to one-up Max just to prove that he's better, even though the past 25 episodes have shown that it's not hard to be better than Max, so he shouldn't even care about any of that. If he acted as more of a foil to Max, being super understanding and kind to Garg, then I feel the episode would have worked. But seeing two bitter, selfish parties constantly ignoring someone who's supposed to be their friend doesn't particularly make for an enjoyable episode. If they didn't make this event Garg is talking about so important that it could destroy them, maybe I wouldn't have felt so bad. But still, I did not laugh once during this episode. This is probably the most simple example of them completely messing up the formula of the show. Thankfully though, they don't fuck up majorly like this again, with the rest of the episodes honestly just being good or okay, but nothing particularly special. But most of it was still pretty fun to watch, as it was one of my childhood favorites. Counterfeit Cat is a truly hidden gem in my opinion. While not perfect in any sense, it's a fun, episodic show with a unique style and a charm of its own. If you want a show similar to Gumball, Adventure Time, with a tinge of comedy and just a tiny bit of storytelling and continuity, I think this is the show for you. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and take care.